let's get into the next one, which is the economics of our sheep flock.
And I think the reason we kind of forgot about this is because the sheep for us are a no-brainer. We never really think about it. It doesn't matter how much they cost. They always come out on top, and we always think they're worth doing.
Well, we're going to go through why that's the case.
That is true.
I guess the first thing is, how many sheep did we have in 2021? Keeping in mind that in the early part we had only the breeders, and then you have all the lambs that ensue. We had to come back and look at this actually. So we had talked about, I guess the problem with the sheep is it's not an all in or all out in 1 year, because as we said, some of them were butchered early, carry over from 2020, and then of course you have your lamb crop. So we basically through the year had 9 breeding ewes, 3 sort of not quite breeding aged ewes that we kept, and the 2 rams that we used, and then we ended up with 13 lambs from those 9 ewes. So,
and we had the 2 rams that we butchered.
Yes, yep.
So when it comes to the numbers, again, same as what we did in our other livestock videos, we've calculated for grains and beet pulp and hay. The other things that also factor in with the sheep that did not factor in with other things were wormers and mineral and shavings, as well as butcher fee. So to start off with the grains, beet pulp, and hay, we spent in total $2,090.36, which actually isn't too bad. Then when it came to wormer, we did have, we always worm all of our ewes right after lambing before they go to the new pasture. Everybody gets wormed. That's just how it works. And we also usually still worm our young sheep at weaning, just to make sure
as needed.
Yeah, as needed.
That's an as needed.
We're slowly improving on that, and that's something we are culling and selecting for. But it's a long process to get there. So as much
it doesn't happen quickly.
No. So we had $101.63 spent on wormer, $60.94 spent on mineral, which is not really avoidable, really. You are spending to make sure that they have the things that they need.
That's stuff that you can't really, for the most part, produce yourself.
Exactly. And then we had $75.70 spent on shavings. Now, this year, for 2022, we haven't kept them in the barn like we did the previous year. So we have a lot less shavings expense this year, but in total, we had $2,328.63, plus a butcher fee of $174.02. So,
because we only sent the one.
Yeah, we only sent the one big boy. We did all the young ones ourselves last year.
Which really isn't that bad.
Yeah, made a significant savings, that's for sure. We actually did do our butchering in April. So we actually fed them for a bit longer than what we did in 2022, because this year we've butchered them all in February. So got a little more on the ball there, but that's a digression.
One thing we'll say here on the feed side of things, we have been feeding beet pulp, pellets and shreds. In the summertime, the shreds, it's more just to give them something to have some control over them.
It's that encouragement to come back to the pen
along with the grain, so that they don't need a lot of grain. Basically, is the short answer. But we were using the beet pulp because we didn't have our pastures completely developed, and so there are times when, if we didn't have as much second cut hay as we would like, it takes the edge off. But we are going through
phasing it out.
Yes, trying to phase it out as much as possible. And just use what we have. Now, at face value, that sounds like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you have done that to the beginning? But pasture fencing and that sort of stuff takes time.
Time and money. It does add up a lot when you're doing acres and acres of paddocks. But as the more we improve how much pasture we have, and also improve the quality of the pasture, the less we are.
The less feed costs there will be. Although we can't eliminate the winter.
No, but hopefully our pastures will last longer every year, so that you've got a bit more and not having to feed the hay. Because we were feeding hay even in the summer last year.
We had quite a few sheep, so that entire feed cost.
We have no idea how many sheep we had. Well, it's kind of like chicken math. I don't know. There's sheep. We don't know how many.
The entire feed cost for that many sheep, when you start looking at it that way, is really not that bad.
At peak, I'm going to say it this way. at peak time, we had 24 sheep. Some were lambs, some were 1-year-old ewes that we'd kept, some were breeding flock. But at the peak of last year, 2021, the most sheep we had on the property at one time was 24 sheep. How's that? Does that work?
That's perfect.
If anybody has any questions, put them in the comments below. We'll try and figure it out for you. But the basic gist is, at peak, we had 24. It's kind of like the same as the chickens. You have so many at some points and not so many at others. But anyways, that is our highest number. The lowest that we had at any given point was 15. So
in the spring, after we had
and then we had some butchering, then we had more born, and then we had some selling, and but we're coming to that
it's a yearly cycle.
Exactly. So that $2,328.63 helped to cover the cost for up to 24 sheep at one time. We're terrible at keeping records. Well, not keeping records, because we're pretty good at that. But
Making it make sense.
It makes sense to us. We know what we're talking about. Now, the one thing that I will say when we kind of filter through those numbers of sheep, it makes absolutely no sense, I know. But included in this, we fluctuated to the 24 sheep, but then we did actually sell 7 lambs this year. So between butchering some, selling 7, we're going into 2022 with, dramatic pause, how many have we got? So we're going in with 20. We've increased our flock up to 20. We've got 12 breeding ewes. We've got 4, technically we used 5 breeding rams. And we have 3 ewes that we're carrying over to potentially bump out some older ones this year. So
And
that gives you an idea where we're at.
2 of those younger breeding rams have already gone.
Yes. And one older.
And one older. So we've actually...
But that's for the 2022 year. So, but I was just giving a number. So we started out 2021 with 15 sheep. Breeding, as well as 1-year-olds that were either for butcher or for... growing our flock. Then we increased up to 24 sheep after the lambs were born. And then we had some live sales of 7, which brought us down. Then we purchased 2 older rams as well. So that brings us out to going into 2022 with 22 sheep. Everybody with me so far? Chris isn't. Chris is like, I have no idea what's going on. So for those live sales, we brought in $1,400, which is nice. It's not definitely something you can count on every year. We had a great year for live sales. We had a great, we had equal number. We had the same ewe lambs as ram lambs, so it worked out perfect. Where some years we've had a lot of ram, and that they're, so it ended up being very beneficial to have them have the registered stock and be able to sell them.
On top of that sort of live sales, we basically processed or butchered 170 pounds worth of lamb / sheep meat in 2021.
And again, that's done the same way we said with the chickens and whatnot, as some of it was deboned, some of it went into, it's just what went in the freezer. So it's not based on a hanging weight or anything. It was just what we actually processed and put into the freezer. So
that works out to roughly $13.70 a pound.
Yeah, that's without the live sales factored in. So that includes butcher fees, all the minerals, all the feed, all that sort of stuff. We were at $13.70 a pound, which is a little bit high. We know there's ways to improve that, but all in all, for homegrown grass-fed lamb, not bad, not a bad number. Once we factored in the $1,400 in live sales and took that off, we were looking at $5.46 a pound.
Which kind of shows when things are sort of unique, you do have that ability to potentially help cover some of their costs by basically selling breeding stock to other people who may want to get started. That being said, that's not something you can scale up. And it's not something,
It's not something you can count on. No, yeah, either.
Because we've had quite a few years where we don't sell anything. So
yeah, so that's why we always kind of factor in both numbers, because then you see this is what it would have cost if we'd sold nothing. Now, saying that, if we'd sold nothing, we would have butchered a lot more meat.
Also true.
So it would have probably balanced out. It's hard to say, really, because we didn't do it. So
exactly.
I don't know if you want to talk about it, but there's a lot of extras to the sheep that we didn't factor in this at all.
This is, again, we're kind of keeping it as that cold hard numbers. Obviously, going into 2022, we're hoping to milk. Well, if we can do that and produce a product from them, that would that's a value-added product from them, right? So that would be, you'd have to look at the value of whatever volume of milk you get. The fleece.
That's something we've never factored and weighed and paid really a whole lot of attention to.
And partially because we have a bit of a backlog of fleece. So it's just been hard to keep track of it.
This year, 2022, though, I am going to weigh everything that I bring in that I shear off, because I think next year's, I want to give it a value.
Because we actually do use it.
And use it, we sell the products. So it's got a value.
Mm-hmm. So all in all, I think the sheep are pretty simple in a way, because they're not that expensive.
No.
For what they are. You can have an entire sort of population of them with diverse genetics, etc., and they still not break you if you have land. That also factors back into what we were saying at the beginning about our feed cost could hypothetically be less. Probably a fair bit less if we can get our pastures up and running as well as we'd like to. And we should see improvement year after year with that. So the one, I guess, negative in a way with sheep, if for anybody who's thinking they may want to start with it, you won't see, and again, this is not your value added, not, the fact that it's homegrown meat, and realistically that is priceless because you have food produced. But those cold hard numbers, if you start a sheep flock, you may not see the real return on that for a few years. It could be up to 5 years. Mm-hmm. But once you get to that point, if you've got a 10-year or longer sort of vision or goal with it, you will see it. You won't see it right away. I think that's a big caveat to put out there.
Well, and just throwing it out there as an interesting fact. Not that anybody wants to eat lamb 24/7 all the time, but for that $2,328, we basically produced 13 lambs. So we have our breeding flock, even if you weren't going to grow your breeding flock or anything. Those 13 lambs, let's say at an average of 35 to 40 pounds hanging weight at a butcher, you are bringing in anywhere from 450 to 500 pounds of meat from those 13. You basically, for $2,328, have enough meat to supply a family of 4. Which we often, that's where we kind of sit with the sheep. It's just, for us, it is a no-brainer, because if it was all we had, we could still make it work. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting thing when you start looking at if you didn't sell anything and you just ate it all, you still have a lot.
There's still a lot of benefit
for
there.
that $2,300.
The one thing that is weird about it is it's not a conventional North American meat, right? It's not a staple. But at a small scale, I mean, historically, sheep were pretty important because small doers could do it, mm-hmm. to put it very bluntly. So there's a lot more discussion there that's beyond sort of just this economic exercise, but mm-hmm. Definitely food for thought for food.
You'd like to say that.
Sounds fun.
But this is just kind of a nice little record-keeping method for us. We can look back in years and look back at every year and go, okay, we see where we improved, we see where we need still to improve. And, hopefully the information will help somebody else out there as well. But as I said, happy to answer any questions people have, and just write them down in the comments. Mm-hmm. And fingers crossed, 2022 will look even better than 2021 did.
Well, hopefully this exercise, when we compare it to some of the other things that we've looked at, obviously like chickens and getting eggs, it's hard because you're comparing apples to oranges, so to speak. But hopefully this helps explain at least one of the factors of why we're using sheep as sort of our principal, what do you call that? Our main livestock on the farm. Yeah. Definitely stay tuned for future sheep content, because this will be something that will feature quite a bit, and this only scratches the surface. So on that note, Also, stay tuned for the next
The
economic
actual garden.
video, which will actually be about our garden discussion, because we think that one's a really interesting one. And some of these livestock discussions are maybe not within the realms of what everybody can do based on how much land and resources and whatnot you have. But the garden discussion, that is well within, I would say, almost everybody's grasp if they so desired to aim for it. So stay tuned for that.